All right, everyone, I'd like to welcome you to the stream. We're just getting started here tonight. We're going to be modeling a Gatling laser. And so I have the image here for you. Let's bring that up. Let me show you that. There we are. So here is the Gatling laser we're going to be creating. And we're going to do this completely from scratch. So I have not done any pre-processing work on this. The only thing I've done is look at a couple pictures to figure out roughly how big it would be for holding it. So I have some rough figures in my head. The rest of it we're going to do completely together here tonight. My goal is within the 4-hour time period to actually complete all of the modeling and perhaps get through some of the unwrapping. We'll see how far along we get with that. But I'm going to show you all the way through taking the concept art, turning it into our orthographics for use in modeling, how to set those up inside of Max. We're going to go ahead and model the entire object, making heavy use of symmetry. I'll show you some tricks for rotating objects to get the 3-pronged effect. And yeah, we're going to model the whole thing together. So as always, I'm open to any questions you guys might have. I got the chat open over here to my left. So go ahead and ask away. I'm happy to stop and explain things. I'm going to go a little faster than usual because we had a lot to do. But I'm going to try and get it all done for you guys. And if there's anything that I think of while we're modeling that is something that I really think you should know, I'll be sure to stop and let you know. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So first, what I'm going to do here inside of Max is I am going to bring up my outliner. I love outliner. Let's get that going. Oops, come on, slide. There we go. So we've got outliner going, and let's make sure that we have our units are set up properly. I like to model in decimal inches, so that's what we're going to do. And, pardon me, let's close that. Let's save the scene, save as. And I have a new project folder created for this. So let's go into that. G for Gatling laser, here we are. All right, I'm going to make a new folder, oops. G for Gatling, sorry, I hit the wrong button. New folder, let's call this our Max files. So there we are. Going to throw this guy in here. We're going to say Gatling laser begin. All right, so that's all good. Now, before we do any actual modeling, we need to break down our concept art and make sure that we have orthographic files that we can use inside of Max. Let's pop over to Photoshop, bring that up, and I'm going to open the concept art. All right, let's see here. Oh, sorry. Completed models, Gatling, laser. So you see here I have a reference folder. So I'm going to go into reference, and I'm going to open up the model sheet here. So now this is concept art provided by one of our team members who got a great opportunity, so he moved on, but I love this guy, he's awesome. His name's Kong, like King Kong. Awesome guy, amazing artist as you can tell. And he's provided me the best possible scenario. So we have 2 great views of the weapon from 2 different sides, and he has here the top, bottom, front, and back. So those are great. We need those to do our job. The only way this could possibly be better is if it had 2 unique sides, then you have a left and a right as well, or some exploded views, but it depends on the concept artist and how much time they have. So this is awesome. So we're going to break this down. We're going to cut these out and then line them up inside of Max. And we're going to have this off to the side as a constant reference. And I'll leave this minimized in Photoshop so we can bring it up so I can show you guys as we're working. So let's go ahead and start cutting it up. I'm going to bring this, where can I get? Yeah, let's view my rulers. There we go. So viewing my rulers allows me to slide these lines outside of the frame window there, and I'm going to choose the exact center of that. And I'm going to bring this down to, we want to get as close as we can with a little bit of bleed. I'm just creating lines right now that are just outside the object here because we're going to cut it out. Let's bring this all the way down. Now one thing you'll notice with concept art is this line here is just below the very bottom of the gun. However, when I slide over here, it's quite a bit further down from the bottom of the gun in this view, which means these views are not perfectly aligned with these views. And that'll happen. That'll happen because things don't physically line up the way they should, and or, you know, with drawing, there's a little bit of leeway, there's a little human error, but we can work with it inside of Max. It's not a problem. All right, so let's bring this line over here. And we'll go all the way to the end of here. So those two are done. And when we cut these out, we're just going to nudge it a little bit over here, so that's not a problem. So we'll come to here, come to there, and I'm going to get the centers of these guys. Now we're going to do one of these two, and then we're going to use that and slide it over because we want to make sure that we have the exact same size horizontally when we bring it into Max. Okay, so those are all set. Let's go ahead and start cutting them out. So I'm going to grab this, select it, and it automatically snaps to my guidelines, which is perfect. So I'm going to say copy new. We get our size 516 by 104. Okay, let's paste that. Put that off to the side. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go and I'm going to move the selection box. So I know it's the exact same size selection box. Bring it down here. You notice it's not quite big enough to get everything in there, so won't work for this weapon, but that's okay. Sometimes we can get that. So we'll get this. But we do know that the other two dimensions, the only other dimension this way is fine. So that'll work. So for this one, I'm going to have to do a file new and paste because he's a fair bit taller than the first one. No worries there. Now, let's come over here. As I said, we're going to have to nudge this one a bit. So I'm going to select this, and then using my arrow keys, I'm going to move up a little bit until I have the same amount of space, or as close as I can to the same amount of space above and below. So right about there is good. I'm going to say copy, new, okay, paste, put that guy over there, over here. Now using my shift and arrow keys, if you hold shift, it goes by a larger amount each time. And if you don't hold shift, watch what happens. It's one little bit at a time. So that's good, perfectly centered, copy. I'm gonna bring this up and this should be exact same, so paste. You'll notice when I did that, that it shifts just a little bit down and right, so I'm gonna try and fix that. 1 and 1, it's a lot better. It's still shifting down, I think, on that first one, so let's try and go down one here. There we go, that's good enough that it'll be close enough inside of Max for us. Okay, so this is good for now. I'm going to leave this kind of full screen so we can check it for details. Let's minimize that. Let's get these guys saved out so we can start working. So I'm going to save this, and under my reference folder, I like PNGs, it's just my preference. I'm going to call this gun underscore side. Save that, okay. Save you. Gun underscore top. Save that, okay. And is that a, that's, yeah, that is the top. Okay, well, I thought it might be the bottom there for a second. All right, so we can close those. Those have been saved as other file names. Now this one, we're going to save twice. So this one we're going to call you, gun underscore rear, because this is the rear side of the weapon. Okay. Save. And gun underscore back. I'm sorry. Oops. Gun underscore front. Much better. There we go. Okay. So now, let's open our newly created files because we're going to need to reference them for their size inside of Max. So here we are. Okay. I only need one of these because they're the same size. All right, so let's jump over to Max. We're going to create a couple planes. I'm going to create a plane in the front view. I'm going to create a plane in the top view. And I'm going to create a plane in the side. We'll go left is fine. I usually go right, and there's reasons for it, but it's okay. So what I'm going to do here is before we get these sized correctly, what I'm going to do is make sure that they're all moved correctly. So you see as I'm moving things through space, I want to, let's bring up my, so right now this is at 0y. So as I move it here, I'm moving into the positive y. So that's moving frontwards into space. So that's where the barrel should be outward spoking. You know, when you're holding it like this, and you have the barrels going this way, that's going to be our forward direction. So what I want to do is move my, when I'm looking at the front of the barrel, I'm looking down the barrel of the gun. I want to be looking at the front, so that means that it should extend negatively into the y. So I'm going to move this back this way. And that'll make more sense in a few moments. And let's move this down. Now, the reason these are oriented the way they are is you want to make sure that when you're looking at your reference, that it's behind your model. so that you don't suddenly have this problem where the reference is in front of the model. Now, I have no idea what's going on here. So that's what we're doing with these references here. All right, so one at a time, let's check our front. I'm going to center it to the X. There we are. Excellent. We can actually center it to the Z as well. It's just the Y that we can't center it because it's over that way. Now here is my left. Similar game here. The only thing I can't center it to is the X, but the other two can be centered. And then this guy can be centered to everything except the Z. There we go. Perfect. So now let's look at our model sheet here. So if I look at my image here, it tells me that it is, it doesn't tell me there, turn that back on. Image size. So this is 516 by 130, okay? Sounds good. So what I like to do is I'll start with that and then I'll make adjustments. And you'll see what I'm talking about. So we're going to take our plane down to 1 by 1, and it is 130 and 516. So that's the full complete size of it, but we want to make sure we go by physical inches. So I'm going to scale it down from there to a physical box. That way the ratio is correct from the original image to my real world ratio. It'll make more sense in a second. So now if we check, the top down is going to be the same in one direction but not in the other. So if we check its dimensions, it's 516 by 104, okay? So let's look at him down. So this is the left side, so this is the top. So let's go 1 and 1, okay? So this is our width, so that's going to be the 516 and 104. There we go. So now proportionally, these two are equidistant based upon the original artwork. All right, and now let's go to our front, which is going to be one of the small ones. Doesn't really matter which, but we'll use the front just for chagrins. And here we are. So he's 104 by 130, and 130 is the height because it's obviously taller. Okay, so 1 and 1, and there we go. That's going to be our 130, 104. Right? Those were the numbers. Those were the numbers I was given. Image size 104 by 130. Correct. All right. So now all of our images are set up. I'm going to move this guy a little bit further, so he's kind of at the end cap of everything. That's looking good. Now, what we need to discuss is how big is this thing going to be? We need to make sure that we're working to physical standards, okay? So let's bring up the image of the gun. Now, if you look at this gun, obviously this is a handle in the back that you would hold and pull the trigger. And then about a certain distance from it, we have a bar that you would hold. So if you look at this physically, if I back up a little bit, if you look at this physically, this is obviously too close. It's more of a relaxed grip to let both arms take into account. So what I did was I figured, based upon some images I found on the web, that this distance from those two objects, which would be from the very end of the gun here to this very, let's just call it right here, this line, right before the cylindrical part begins, that would be about 18 inches across that way. Then the barrels extend roughly another 18 and change. So let's do a quick test. So if I take a selection, and I go here, and if I say, I'm going to call that 18 inches, if I now move this so that it's here, you'll notice another 18 inches takes me to here. So if that's 18, another so amount from there would get me to, oh, hello, manhen1234. Welcome. Again, welcome to everybody. If you guys have any questions, we're going over sort of the basics of getting into modeling and how to set up your concept art properly. So if you have any questions at all, please don't be afraid to ask. I'll be happy to answer them. So if we have 18 from here to here, we do another 18, it brings us to here. So let's just call this 24 and maybe 26. If we add just a little bit at the end, we'll extend it just a little bit. We can make changes to the concept art. It's not set in stone. This is just the beginning idea. So we're going to call this 18, and 18 is 36, and then we're going to do a little bit more. So let's call it 40 inches long, okay? So 40 inches long is not quite 3 feet, or it's a little more than 3 feet actually. So what you would have is about this far, and that seems good considering that this is supposed to be something you're supposed to be able to carry, and we can make adjustments later as well. Nothing is permanent, but a good starting point. And now we need to determine how tall it's going to be. So if that's 18, that distance there, if you figure roughly half of that, because if I look at this distance here all the way to the top, so it's 18 across, then you're looking at least 12 high, maybe even 16 high once you get to the top. So yeah, that feels about right to me. The gun is 24 inches. 24 inches. 24 inches long? Because that would only be 2 feet. And it's clearly more than a foot to hold the handle and the trigger at the same time, so that's why I figured closer to 18 for that distance. And then if you double that, because the barrel is clearly very long. It's a massive weapon. This is not something that you can, sling on your back. But are you speaking from real world experience as far as the size of an actual Gatling gun? You've seen a fair number of them in the real world? Oh, okay. Seems fair. Okay. And as I said, we can make adjustments later on. We just need something that we can work off of so that it seems proportionate. I think everything can be adjusted. So for now, we're going to go with 40 inches by 16 inches high. And now let's look at width. So if I line this up over here, assuming human hand is this size here, you move it over at its widest point here. I'd say that's about 14 inches. Based upon 2 hands should be able to go in the center. So that's about 3 or 4 inches again, 8 inches, 9, 10, 11, 12, and a little bit of slop. So we'll call this 12 across here. So that's a foot across. Seems fair about this, the size. Seems fair. Sorry, I'm reading from the screen. About the size of the cylindrical thing, and then we got the extra bits coming off. So okay. So we're going to do 40 by 16 by 12. Okay. So let's go back to Max and start making things. So I'm going to create a box in the center of the world, roughly rectangular. And we have our measurements, so let's go 40 inches, which looks small at the moment. These things are huge, don't worry, we're going to scale those down. So our width here is going to be 12, and then we're going to go 16 tall. So let's look at that. So that's the total size of our gun. Now, take into account, it looks wrong in this area because this total height goes all the way to the top of the trigger thing. So if you look at our concept art, goes all the way to the top of the trigger thing. So if you bring that down by quite a bit, it makes it a lot thinner. So if we bring this down to something more like 12 or so, see, we're getting a lot more like the size of the gun. But I want to keep 16 in here so I know the total bounds of the whole thing. All right, so let's go to our move, and we're going to center it to the world. And I'm going to come in here, and we're going to, the very bottom of that is fine. Okay, so it's completely centered to the world. This is just our reference object. So I'm going to turn this transparent, and under here I'm going to create a new layer. So let's say create new layer, reference, and we're going to move all of these objects into the reference layer. So now the idea is that later on when we're modeling, we can turn our reference on and off. Okay, so we need to name these things because these are terrible names. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to name this size ref. We're going to name this. This is our side ref. This is our front. And this is our top. Now for these 3 objects, what we're going to want eventually is to make sure that they are frozen and they don't show up in renders. But for now, let's get the textures applied to them. So we're going to have 2 textures that we're going to use, or materials, pardon me. 2 materials we're going to use for modeling, and then we're going to have another one here for UVs, and then these bottom 3 are going to be for our images. So let's name this reference side, reference front, and ref. Did I name them? Reference top. No, I did do ref. Yeah. because it's faster to type. Okay, so let's assign these. So front goes there, and side goes here. Now we can start to bring in, and what I'm going to do is turn the color on these all the way up, which means they're completely self-illuminated. They have no lighting applied to them whatsoever. They don't follow any of those rules, and that's good. We want that. So if you're not familiar with Macs, just quick. Let me do this again. So I'm going to click here in the diffuse spot. Let me clear it. Click here in the diffuse spot, meaning I want to assign something to the diffuse channel. I'm going to give it a bitmap, which is just your standard image file. And now I'm going to browse my computer for that image file. So project folder is down here. Completed models, Gatling, under my reference. And now this is my side image. So let's throw the side in there. And there we are. So now our side image has appeared. There we go. And like we said, it's very huge at the moment, and we're going to make sure we bring that down to physical size. So let's do the other two. So front should remember my preference, yeah, for where I want to be. Oh, we do have a rear as well. We should set that up as well. There we are. So front, there we are. We'll make the rear out of the front, so I'll show you that. It's pretty easy. And this is the top. There we go. Now clicking this button here is the show end result. So what that does is that actually shows it inside of Max. Did I do this the wrong way? I did this the wrong way. Let's rotate that, turn on my snapping. So the reason this looks all skewed at the moment is because I used the wrong directions for it. So this should be 516 and 104. So 104 and 516. There you go. So that's why it looked weird. It was the wrong way around. It was stretched funny. Okay. So we do need one more material slot here for our reference for the rear. Again, we're going to bring our color all the way up. And I'm going to take the front reference and I'm going to drag a copy out. So holding shift and drag, I'm going to drag all the way to here. And call this, keys would work, rear reference, there we are, okay. And I will assign that material. Okay, almost done. There we are. Excellent. All right. So now what we have is, if we go into our views and we turn these off of wireframe for the moment, let's do shaded on all these. Yes, please. Shaded. All right, now. So now when I'm in the front view, I'm looking at the front of the gun. When I'm in the top, I'm looking down on top of the gun, and the left, I'm looking over the left. And I can go to the front and change this to the back. And you'll notice now I'm looking at the back of the gun, because that's what I want. That's what I want to be able to see. For the most part, we're going to be doing the front, so let's do that. Okay. Now, this is our physical size of the gun, so we need to bring everything down to size to make sure that our reference matches that. So what we're going to do is select all of our reference files here, and I'm going to scale them until they match up with our physical cube, because that's what we want. We want physical cube is our correct size. So drag, 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 kind of eyeballing it, but my cursor went off screen. Problem with having multiple monitors. And right there, let's move them up. A little bit more, because they went off screen a little bit. All right, let's get those lined up. There we are. Excellent. Excellent. Now, everything got all wonky. Let's figure out why. Oh, you guys did not scale on the right axis. That's why. There we go. Now they're playing better. And you, sir, are from the top. There we are. Okay. So now we have a physical cube to make sure that we are in the right physical dimensions, and now our references are all scaled properly, so now we should be able to model without issue. You guys still look a little funky, don't you? Do that. Yeah, they look a little strange. There we go. Okay. And on the bottom does not look right either. Looks very, very wide. Okay, we'll have to. Yes, I'm making this for I'm part of a group called Starboard Games, and we're making a sci-fi game called INT, or Interstellar, and this is one of the Gatling weapons. They put up the concept art. You may have not seen from the very beginning. So here we are. So this is the concept art, and down here you can see Starboard Games. Oh, and actually at the bottom of the stream as well, there's Starboard Games down here. This is the company, and so yeah, we're making some laser weapons tonight. We've already made quite a bit of weapons for them, and let me see if I can look quickly. 2 pistols, a shotgun, a railgun, a couple beds, chairs, debris, couches, gauze rifle. I think my favorite so far is the advanced pistol. Okay, up. Oh, no, that is not the one I was thinking of. Here it is. Can either be mounted on a shark. Probably, that would be pretty awesome. And I love the username Daft Punk. So this is one of the guns that I made for them already. This was so here's the concept art you see here, and this is what we ended up with. So, can you play the game? Yes, you can, as soon as it's done. Yeah, we have an IndieDB page, and I can get you in contact with some of the coding leads, and they can let you know as soon as the public demo is available. So, but for the meantime, we got to make some awesome weapons that you guys can actually play with. All right, so now that we're done with the all the sizing and referencing and all that kind of stuff, we can begin to start shooting things. That's the fun part, right? So let's scale these up a little bit in its physical size. So there we go. Perfect. And there may be some. Oh, hey, Chris. Very glad you can make it out. Thank you so much for coming. Let's make sure that all of our references are proper and aligned. So make sure we don't have to go back and change anything. We'll probably have to make something got wonky with the. My math was solid, but something got wonky, so we're just gonna go forward, and we will we'll correct as we need to go along. Okay, so that looks about right there. Cool. All right. So I'm gonna hide the cube for now because we don't need him at the moment. We just need to make sure that all of this lines up, and then we can start really digging into it. Okay. Let's turn all of these. Let's turn everything semi-transparent for the moment. And so that way we can make sure everything lines up. These guys are the same size, perfect. This guy should be the same size as all that, so let's check that out. Turn on our edge mode here so we can see the edges of things. And if I scale this outward, you'll see now those line up. But what we need to make sure is when we do that, see this gets very, very fat looking. So I need to make sure that that's correct based upon the size of everything else. And according to our artwork, it should be, and we're going to make a quick one piece to make sure that everything is correct before we jump in, because you don't want to go back and make all kinds of changes later on. It's really, really a pain in the butt to do that. So a little bit of prep work at the beginning, but trust me, it'll save us lots of time later on. All right, so let's scale to make sure that we are correct on this axis. Okay. Very good. So let's make our first object. I'm going to make a new layer, create a new layer, and this is going to be, we're going to work on the crossbar first. So with this layer selected, now when I make a new object like a box, for example, you'll notice that automatically it's on that layer, which is perfect. Right, come on, there we go. So what we're going to do is, this is our test object here. We're going to check out the size of this bar across here is what we're looking for. So I'm going to just go ahead and work that out. So actually, now what we need to do is, if we're correct, and we said that this was going to be 12 inches across, I think was what we agreed on for the bar here. So yeah, that's looking really good right at those edges. If I zero it on the x-axis, you'll notice it's right in the middle. So if we look at it from above, 12 inches. So it's a little wide on the bottom. So let's scale him, oops, thank you. Scale him a little bit, there you go. So now that crossbar is correct, that's our 12 inches. And from the front, he should line up nicely with that area, and he does. So notice it lines up here, and it lines up here. So that's really good. Now we need to make sure that he's lining up in this area as well. And if I bring him outside this for a second, you can see what I'm talking about. So this bar, he needs to go right there. If I put him right there and then I move him back over here, he lines up at the top of that. And it's a little hard to tell sometimes, so if you look at the concept art, it can help you kind of figure out in 3D what that should be. So if I zoom in here and look, the very bottom of this edge is the bottom of this, but you see that this part continues underneath. So I think that's what we're seeing here. So that's lined up perfectly, and then this here is what we're seeing right here. So it's like that T shape, but when you look at it from the side, it's, well, to try and do this in the camera, so it's half and half. So I think we're okay. And if we're okay, then that is great news. All right, so I think we're all set. So let's go ahead and, I actually did this slightly incorrectly. Let's move this over here. This over here. And you should be here and rotate it around. 180. I don't want to see back face culling on these. Let's go to our object properties for a second. I'm going to show you guys turn back face culling on these objects. Yes, this is perfect. So what back face culling does, for those of you who are not familiar, is it allows the object to act as though it can only be seen from one side. The reason that's so important in something like this is when I'm in my front view here, what I want to look down the barrel of the gun. So here's the barrel, and I want to look down the barrel. I want to see the front of the gun, like I'm looking in the barrel. So I put that image at the back of the gun, technically. But when I look at it from the back of the gun, I want to be able to see the back. You know, I want to be able to see the back because I'm lining up things, but I have to look through the first object. So that's what back face culling allows me to do. So now I can look through both objects. So that's absolutely perfect. And then here on the side, we're going to do the same thing with this guy. Object properties, back face culling is on. So now when I look at it from the other side, I look through the gun. And let's do it on the bottom as well. There we are. All right, we are in business, guys. Let's go ahead and save, because we want to make sure we save often. So this was our test object. I'm going to delete them for now. Don't really want to start right there. But now we are all set up and everything should line up properly. If anything doesn't, we can always fudge it just a little bit to make sure that it physically works. Because like I said, no drawing will ever actually line up 100%. So, let's do it, shall we? All right, let's delete this. And I'm just going to throw a bunch of objects down and we will organize it as we go. I am going to bring up the concept art off screen for myself. Here we are. I'm going to bring this up over here. And I can't see my my settings for the, but I should be okay. Let's do that. There we go. All right, go on. There we are. So where to begin? Let's bite the head off the frog, so to speak, and we're going to do the actual rotation chamber in the center with 3 spokes off of it for the actual, Gatling, building up the energy, however it works. And I'm going to show you a trick on how to do the rotation. So for the rotation for that, we bring up my calculator. We have 3 spokes, so if we do 360 degrees divided by 3, you get 120 degrees. So we're going to model the center one, give it a center pivot, and then rotate it by 120, rotate a copy by 120. Okay? So let's create a cylinder, and I'm going to go in from the front view, drag it out, try and make it about that size. And try and look over here. I'm going to need to move it back first, so let's line it up with that. And over here. Okay, so just work with the height real quick. Go to the full extent, something like that. All right, height segments of 1, number of sides 20. 20 is my new favorite number for sides of a cylinder because pardon me, because it's even, and it's enough that you get a rounded effect, but not so much that it lags anything out. So there we go. All right, we're all good there. So we're gonna name it. What should we call this? I don't know. Rotation cylinder. CYL. Idea. So I'm just gonna name it something that makes sense to me. I'm going to throw an edit poly on there, and the reason why I'm throwing the edit poly instead of turning it into an editable poly is now I have the ability to go back and change it later if I need to. And I'm going to set this up so black wireframes. Let's bring up our original two, and this is going to be our first here. So let's do, nope, not that. I actually want to change the diffuse color to 155, 155, 155. That's my favorite. And then over here, we're going to change this guy, a second material, to 55, 55, 55. It's like a darker one, so we can have pieces next to each other, kind of differentiate between the two. Let's turn the smoothing all the way up, no specular, and nothing else on there. Smoothing all the way up. So there we go. All right. So that's good. Let's do invisible. And what we need to do is this guy has to taper. He needs a hole in the center, and he needs two rings. So we're gonna do all those as separate pieces, so that way we don't have to have so much excess going on. So let's do edges. Oops. Let's, I'm going to select the back, the part that's going to be butted up against the gun, delete it. You're never going to see it. Let's do the front. Get rid of these. And let's bevel you. Oh no, sorry, not bevel. I meant. Yes. There we go. Chamfer. Chamfer that guy down. Let me look through this. It actually kind of comes right to the first ring. So it was almost perfect, kind of right out of the box. So right there is good. Okay, it's looking quite nice. Take the front and we're going to inset just a little bit. A little bit more. Always checking the reference on the side. Make sure that we're correct. There we are. We do need a bit of a hole, so I'm going to extrude probably only about that much. You just want just enough that we can start to get some shadows inside of it, and then we'll black it out with the texture. We don't need a whole lot there. Okay, and let's check over here. He lines up at the edge there. I'm going to select the whole thing and actually scale him down just a little bit. Scale him down just a little bit from the front. Just want to make sure that it lines up about there. Right about there, so then we can have the rings have to come outside of that circumference, okay? There we go. Now, here's a trick for you. I'm gonna select this and do ring, select polygons, and do a detach. But what I'm gonna do is detach as clone, and I'm gonna actually use the clone in order to create the rings, so I don't affect my original object. So the rings can be removable. We can do whatever we want with the rings later on. Select all, and let's do an auto smooth on this. Wow, all these. Auto smooth. There we go, so that piece is complete. Now I'm going to select my other object, and I'm going to call this just make rings right now, because that's what we're going to use it for. Let's select make rings. There we are. And I'm going to hide my other object so that I can see what I'm working with. I'm going to turn this semi-transparent. I know the first ring is right at the edge, and we're going to have to mirror that over. I'm going to make a second connection. Move this over to the center of that ring. And I'm going to chamfer that. And so I need to figure out how much I need to chamfer that by. Let's do 0.15, so we have a nice round number, what I call happy numbers. I love happy numbers. Ring and extrude. And we're going to do by local normal. And just going to be just a little bit, just enough to get a little bit of detail in there. So let's go 15. There we are. And nothing is ever completely square, completely sharp. So in our high poly, we're going to actually add a little bit of a bevel in there. But that's good for right now. So now that's one ring. So what I'm going to do here is select the excess, so to speak. Easier to do over here. So select the excess and delete it. And I'm going to take this ring and just shift a copy of it over. Right there. Okay, slow. Here we are. Okay. So So these guys are all set. Now I'm going to leave them like that for now because we're going to use them in the future when we make our final changes to the one. We'll copy and snap another copy to there. So let's give them a more sensible name. So let's call this rotation ring B, and this guy will be rotation ring A. There we are. Okay. So I'm going to put all of these guys into a folder now, or into a layer rather. Sorry. Call this rotation. So this will be all the rotation stuff. So let's drag that in there. So now all of that is organized. So if I unhide that, we have the beginnings of our rotation. According to the concept, I'm gonna have to move these just a little bit because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that it's buried in there. Where is the edge of this? Yeah, see, I can't even see the edge of the. Let's undo that. I'm gonna move this just for a second. Yeah, see, he goes right to there. Okay, just seems very, very sharp, but it's correct. So there we are. All right, so we got the beginning of our rotation piece. Now we're gonna make the spokes, and then we'll be rigging this model at all. No, I'm not gonna rig it, but what I will do is I will leave the pieces open so rigging can happen eventually. But I will, time permitting, I will be unwrapping it as well. We'll go over unwrapping, some of the auto packing tools, some manual packing, and kind of show you guys a little bit of the best of both worlds, so to speak. Oh, one thing we did not do, so let's do that now. So I'm going to take all of our reference objects and let's go to our object properties. So we are going to freeze them. We're going to uncheck show frozen in gray, and we're going to uncheck renderable. So say OK. So now we are unable to select them, and when I focus on an object and I want to look at the gun overall and I render, you'll notice you don't see them at all. So let's set up our rendering as well. Render setup. I want 1920 by 1080, full 1080p. Let's lock that. And under renderer, everything's fine here. We'll change that when we do final renders. And the environment, let's change that to my 55s, which I like. There we go. Now we can see the weapon. What I used to do with other models is I would put like if I know this is going to be the total size of the model, I would set up a camera angle, something like this, where you technically should be able to see the whole weapon as soon as it's done. And I can do Control C and create a camera. And if I move the camera to the default layer, there we go. So the camera is here the whole time, so we can save incrementally and go back and render from the camera, and you see the weapon kind of progress. It's pretty cool. So let's do a save as and progress this. So Gatling laser 1. So now we are actually in the modeling process, and I'm going to hide the camera for now because I don't want to be bothered by it. All right. So now we need to go to building the actual spokes. So let's start with that. So under my rotation, I'm going to say box. Start everything with a box. And we're going to model one from the side, and then we're going to rotate the other copies. Let's go ahead and drag him out. And there we go. All right, so now he is centered to the axis, which is awesome. We need to look carefully at this and see kind of how far out he needs to go. Looks like that's the edge. Okay. So let's work with that. Is that the height? It is. So that's good. We're just going to do half for now. That's actually pretty good for that. Okay. And let's hide the rest of it so that we can work with just this for the moment. And from, let's give it our setup. We're going to make this the other color. Let's call this, what should we call this? These are the 3 spokes at the end, so I guess spoke is good for now. And again, we're going to add an edit poly so we do as much as possible a non-destructive workflow. So starting with the left, starting with the side view rather, let's push and pull our points until we have our outline. Something like that is good. I'm going to go to the other side and delete this face, and I'm actually going to delete all faces except just the one that is facing. So we'll just make our outline and then we'll go from there. Okay. So I'm going to work mostly in the left view for the moment. And I'm just going to cut some shapes out of this. So let's just make a couple connects. I need 2 there, 1 there, 1 over there. Vertices, move them into place. You're going to go there, you're going to go there. I need another one. So all I'm doing here is following the shape. So see, I make those 2 cuts, so now I can move these points to there. This guy was on the corner, so he can go there. Those guys are all set, but I'm going to need another one here. And what you can do with these is, if you bring up the tool, I want this to remain, but I need like one right there. So if I do a slide, now what that does for me is that allows me to move this here without affecting this slope. Okay, so that's very important. I'm looking over at my concept art to make sure that I'm doing this correctly, and I'm going to do right there. Okay. Now all those are good. I'm going to move this guy to right there. Do another one in the middle. Connect. That's actually really close. Right there. So now I can select all of these 3 points and move them up like that. Okay. And this slope actually doesn't work anymore. Let's get out of my face. Put a little gnat or something. Okay. Let's move those. Perfect. Okay, I can take you and chamfer you a little bit. Get that angle going. So it's not, not anything fancy, just kind of getting the shape down for right now. And I'm gonna connect in the middle here. Oops, there we go. So we're gonna clean this up. I'm just making sure we have all the points that we're going to need. So like this guy can be more like that. Help serve that purpose. And you are the mystery one. Let's look at our concept art a little bit closer. I need to figure out how this is connecting into it. Okay, I see it a little bit better here. It's in shadow based upon the concept art, so I need to make sure I know what's going on here. And this does come pretty much straight across and connect inwards, so that's good to know. So let's go to our cut mode. I'm just going to cut some of the rest of the pieces out of here. Cut this, cut that, and to here and straight down. Okay. So now you should be able to be deleted. Yes. Okay. Looks good. Let's remove you. Good. Alright, so now we have our outline. Just straighten that out. Now we have our outline, and we need to cut into the middle. There's these little there's a little gap at the front where energy can stand with you at low opacity. It might help you. That's true. Yeah, that is one of the tricks. I can actually lower the opacity of the object. So if I go to, so this is on this. So if I lower the opacity of this, you should be able to see through it better. I think I have to turn it off. See, all the way up, and I can put it like lower. So, good tip. Thank you. Yeah. I forget about some of the things. I've done a video on that, and I forget some of those things when you're in the moment. You're trying to work. And welcome, and thank you very much for joining us this evening. Okay, so now that we have this, we need to cut our shape into the middle there, and based upon the imagery here, it looks like it goes a lot further than it does. And I'm trying to figure that out right now. Let's take a look. According to the imagery, it only cuts in a little bit, but here it looks like it cuts in a lot more. So let me show you what I'm talking about so we can figure it out together. So what we're working on right now is this little opening. We're working on this little opening right here, and you notice it kind of collapses very quickly. However, in the concept art, if you look here, it looks like it's a lot bigger of an inset here. It looks like it goes all the way back. So this is one of those times where the concept artist gives you something and then you have to kind of work through it and figure out if it doesn't make sense physically with the rest of it, and if it's a mistake in one place or another. So there's a little bit of human interaction that has to go on with this. I'm thinking that this might be, either incorrect or it's not showing me everything appropriately, because if I look over here in the length view, I do see that inset quite a bit further over here. So I think we're going to go for the inset and we'll just solve it to the rest of this, because I don't see it here, but I do see it here and I do see it here. So the fact that I see it twice, 2 out of 3, I think I'm going to go for that. Let's bring that back over here so I can see that full screen. There we are. What does Skype need? Yes, please. Okay, excellent. Yes, oh yes, concept artist again. Let me show you guys the concept artist again. Unfortunately, he's no longer part of our team because he got some great opportunities and he moved on, bigger and better things. Very proud of him. But the guy's name is Kong, K-O-N-G, just like King Kong. That's his real legal name. Amazingly talented artist, and just completely my hat's off to him for everything that he's done. So every gun that I have modeled for INT and for Starboard Games has been by him, and that's why they look as good as they do, honestly. I just make it look like what he drew. Take a quick drink here, guys. Okay, so long story short, we're going to go for the big cut all the way back. Pardon me. So I'm going to do my cut tool, and I'm going to do it sloppy, and then we're going to clean it up a bit. So boom, 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 and all the way out. I'm not going to cut all the way to that tip because, again, nothing is perfectly sharp. And I'll show you a nice little trick here. So I know I want these 3 to be straight, so if you just go to your scale tool and scale only on the one axis, then you can make sure those tighten up. Let's go to those, scale those down, go to these guys, and we got a little bit of cleanup work to do here. Let me delete the innards here because we're not going to use these. Let's delete those, there we go. That helps me get rid of some vertices right away. Clean that up, there we are, okay. Perfect. We'll get rid of all that. Scale that. Oops, gotta grab it, the final one there. Make all that. Perfect. Alright. Let's bring you almost straight up. A little bit of an angle is fine. Let's remove you. Just kind of cleaning up and planning ahead as to where we're going to have things that are going to need to line up. So like if I do a connection here, I'm going to leave this in the middle because this will have a connection here across, and you'll see in a little bit how that plays out. And let's do some cutting down here. So I'm going to cut down like this, and cut down like this, and make sure these are all welded up. Oops, no, please weld. There we are. All right. And the reason I did that is I could technically weld this to this, and I will for the low poly, but for the high poly, I'm trying to keep it as much as I can in quads so that we can do some nice hard surface stuff. Whoa. Wrong tool. There we go. Okay, so now this needs to solve somehow. So what I'm going to do is actually cut it across, cut them all the way across to there. And I will just make all of these match. So if I look at my transformation dialog here on the z-axis here, we've got. I'm just going to copy that. You can copy that value, and I can paste it into here. So I'll paste it. And the reason I can't do a paste across all 3 is because it averages. So I'd have to paste one at a time really quick. Paste across. Now I know that line is completely straight across. And you can copy and paste from here. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but it's very handy. All right, so let's solve up here. We can easily connect those. We do have a 5-sided through here, but I can cut across. We can't really solve for that at the moment, but I can definitely do it from here. So we'll start with this. Try to follow that detail. From this point to this point, you can create a triangle in the corner, yes, but it's okay. It's on a flat side and a 4-sided there, so we'll be okay with that. And we're going to come across here. We'll work that out as we go. And you are going to come down, and you are going to go up as straight up as possible. There we go. Okay, so let's take a look at our shape here. Turn our opacity back up. But it's looking pretty good. Looking pretty good. Now, what we need to know is that it does have lots of angles to it. So we're going to work with them one stage at a time. And then once we get all those angles figured out, we'll work with the center seam to then mirror it across. So if we look at our front view, you'll notice this is one of the three pieces. So here's the triangular kind of shape, and then how it comes down in the middle. So I'm going to move all the points over until they line up with the extreme on the bottom piece that kind of connects and holds everything. And now we're going to work our way across. So we know that this is the very topmost, so that has to go to the center. Let me close this. That has to go to the center, so that's obviously 0 on the X. So there we go. So it's starting to curve already. Now let's find the points that represent the outermost section of the middle. So they come in here. I'd say that's probably these guys here, the outermost section there. So I'll bring those out. There we go. Now you'll notice we're going to have to do some cuts here because one half of it is this kind of tree shape from the side. So we're going to have to do some extra cuts in there. But for now, we're just getting things laid out where we know they're eventually going to end up. And in our front piece here, this guy's it's a pretty simple shape. So these guys are also going to have to go to the X of 0. So let's do that. Boom. Slid him over. Perfect. And I think the same thing for you guys. You're already at 0. Are you already at 0? Yes, okay. Okay, that's looking pretty nice. Go away. It's looking pretty nice. Now, the little slit, this whole slit is on an angle. So what we're going to do with that angle is from our top view, grab those angles, whoa, slide them over. Hey, Matt's coming over. Thank you guys for coming out. There we go. Okay. Make sure the music's not too loud for you guys. You want something that's a little groovy in the background for y'all. Let me know if it gets too loud or too obnoxious, and I can get rid of it. All right. We're going to grab this value on the X, and what I'm going to do is actually just move all these points to that same value. Now, because I know all three of these points are the exact same value, when I paste this in, it will move them there and not. Excellent. Thank you, Justin. Justin is the lead for Starboard Games, by the way, guys. So he's the one we're really doing this for. There we are. Okay. So there's our beginning of our slant. And I'm going to average these so that we get sort of a nice slope instead of it being completely, so something like that. Perfect. Now we can bring that into the curve and kind of smooth out the front eventually. There we are. Okay. So we know that our kind of diagonal cut in the middle there, we're going to need some extra cuts down here. That's okay. Let's figure out where this guy is in the chain. There he is. So he's at the very end of, if I look at my concept art, he's at the very end of that tree. So this is actually a little incorrect. So we're gonna work with it. So I'm gonna move this guy over. This guy represents the very end of that. So he is sort of like that. Because the way that it's looking on my other screen here, the gun, the side of it, and then the cut is right here in the side. So we're gonna work with that. Copy this value, and again, since I moved it slightly, since I know all of these are on the same X value, I can paste them in there. There we go, and they all slide over nicely. Very good, very good. So we're getting there. We're going to solve for this this issue we're seeing here. So let's go into our side view and notice down here is where it really starts to work itself out. So we're going to need to cut that off very shortly thereafter. So we can start right there, kind of halfway in between, and work our way across to a flat surface. So we know that this goes straight in. So what I'm actually going to do is cut with two of my edges, connect, oops, connect, there we are. And I'm going to move this line until it's right where we need it to be. There it is. And I'm going to move it up. And it'll look really weird at first. Hold on. It'll look really weird at first. It has to come in like this, so we need to kind of solve the edges for that. But now we have a line that we can use to start to round out the rest of it down the gun. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So now if I go to here and say connect, we're going to make a new line for all of these guys. And we know that we're going to need it, so let's just bring it all the way down. There we are. We're going to connect that. And from the side here, you can kind of see how it's starting to work out. If I move this up slightly, something like that, it's going to be really tight in here, but then it'll work nicely for the rest of it, so no worries. Let's get that value punched in. Okay, that'll work. And we're going to connect those up. There we go. Very nice. Get that same value for these guys. I believe that's the same. Yes, that is the same. Perfect. Okay. A little bit of number crunching here, but we're getting our shape to come in very nicely. And as soon as this is done, what we can do is then mirror it across. So I'll show you in a moment what that looks like. Let's paste that. And you guys should already be at that value. Pretty much close enough. All right, so at the very end of the weapon here, what I'm going to do is cut you across like that, just to kind of help solve it and round out the tip of the weapon just a little bit. So that works a lot nicer. Okay. Very nice. Now, our one problem area right here is right where we decided to end this. I really want it to be slightly more up and part of that slant. So we're going to have to work that into our equations. So let's cut you back. See, now he has a little bit more substance to him because it's right on the edge, and so right on the edge is always difficult. So let's do that. I'm just moving in the one axis at the moment, just to kind of solve that edge issue that we're seeing. Come down more. And scale on the X, good. So let's back up and take a look, and you really see kind of what we're looking at here. So right at the edge there, it kind of loops underneath. And as we flush out the bottom here, it'll give it some bottom depth and then across to the x-axis. So let me show you here. Let's slide this over, and this line needs to go to 0. So then if we take this guy as well, let's take more than one at a time. I'm just going to show you. Excuse me. Let's not do that. Let's go X. So I skipped this first one on purpose because I'm just going to weld them up. There we go. So now you can start to see this center line that we're going to symmetry off of, and that's why we need to round out the bottom of the gun. So let's go ahead and add our symmetry so that we can get a better view of what we're looking at. Symmetry. Okay, so it's on the wrong axis at first. Now it's correct. Okay. And mirror to 0. Alright, so we're mirrored right down the center, but you notice we got a few problems. It's right down the center, so our points are making this strange pyramid type shape. So let's go back to our edit poly. Now we're going to move them a little bit. If we move all of these points over by just a little bit, we can kind of open that up a bit and really get more of what we were hoping for. And that's... Interesting. That's correct. Oh, our concept art is not at 0. Alright, let's unfreeze our front view reference. And, oh, he is at 0? Because he's definitely off a little bit from my calculations. Alright, let's unfreeze everything. He's off. There we go. Okay. As long as it all moves together, it should be fine. Excellent. So, because this guy is centered to the world, we're going to make sure that's completely centered. There we are. All right, let's get this finished up here and move on to some other pieces that are more interesting. But this piece is quite challenging, so that's why I wanted to start with it, so that we can kind of knock it off our list right away. All right. So let's start to hone in on this. Pushing and pulling some points really quick. Get you guys going. So what I'm doing now is I'm just kind of straightening out some of the lines, making sure that everything is in top ship shape. What really helps is once you start to really be able to close it off, because then you can see how it's reacting in 3D and make sure that all of your edges are looking good. There we go, that's a fair bit better. Yeah. You can see, especially from the top, how we have a little bit of a top look now. Make sure that it looks correct. All right. So now we know that these guys are the very tip of the weapon, so they have to come together. So if we move those a bit closer, there we are. And we're just going to weld across the center there to complete it. Now the very tip does have a bit of a space in it as well, so we can work with that and can make that happen pretty easily. There we are. All right. Slide it a little bit over. Let's go to all vertices and snap to the 0 axis. Symmetry for a second. Symmetry is messing me up a little bit here. Ooh, that's a neat trick. Okay, symmetry. What are you doing to me? There we are. Okay. Okay. Now symmetry is behaving. It was doing a slice and then a weld, so it was creating an extra point where it shouldn't have. All right. Looking pretty good, you guys. We're almost there. Bear with me on a few final adjustments to this piece. Okay, let's make sure we got that going. Make sure they're all equidistant and 0. So the bottom is now closed off. There we are, very nice. And for the tip here, we wanted to purposely leave a gap in it because of the concept art shows there's a little bit of like a forked tongue kind of thing going on in the front of this. So we'll start that by taking this front piece and moving him back. Take the 2 points there, and we're going to straighten them out. There we are. And what I'm going to do is take this vertice and get its Y value, and move these 2 points so that they match that Y value. So now I know that those 2 points are directly above that point. So now if I target weld all the way up, it's perfectly straight, and I know it's exactly where it should be. Move this guy over. I'm going to target weld you to there, and you, I just put it 0, and I know that you mirror across. So now we have that little forked tongue thing area at the front. Okay, very nice. And let's close off the rest of our edges. Let's bring you across. I'm going to bring you way too far to begin with. And target weld backwards. There we are. The only thing I don't like about that tip is that it's creating a triangle on the bottom, but we'll work with it. We'll work it out, no worries. So you're fine there. You need to come out to this distance. So let's grab that, you and you. There we go. So they can all follow along to create these cool little areas in here. Some great opportunities here for some internal mechanisms because we got a lot of space, which is great. I like that. I like having space to do cool things with. And there's no fort. Is there a fort? There is a little bit of a fort thing on the bottom, so let's figure that out. So you are going to go to 0. You are going to get welded to the center. So let's create our solid space, and then we'll fork it in a second. All right. So from this tip of the gun, let's scale that in a little bit. Kind of really round off the front of the gun. So now you can kind of adjust it as you go. We want to be able to have a little bit of play with the shape. If we feel like we have a design idea that's going to work better for it physically, we're free to do that as long as we stay true to the the overall spirit of the image. And there we go. Okay. Slide you across. And make sure to check up on any comments you guys might have or any thoughts. Okay, bridge that across. All right. So now in front, we need a little bit of an inset into this. So I'm going to go here and here and here. Now let's do inset. And give it just about that much. And I'm going to delete on the inside. Let's delete on the inside. Front. And these guys, we will just close the gap. There we are. All right, so that's our center seam. So now if I take these points, now we can adjust how big it looks based upon the concept art. It looks like it's that. I'll take these points and make sure they line up. There we are. And we'll move the front part here forward just a little bit so that we can sink it in and we can have our shape. So let's delete that. I think it'd make more sense to go down first. Down first. Let's get this Z height. And I'll move these back to that Z height. And this front one, we're just going to weld it up. Weld you. Perfect. All right. These two guys over, and I know that I go to my vertices and make sure they're all straight. I'm going to unselect the front one, mirror them up, target weld, final piece. There we go. So now we have the front all figured out. Let's fill in the gaps, and then should be ready to move on. That's all set there. Perfectly straight, I think. Now we do have to make a couple of adjustments for this, so because we have some geometry that is not completely centered, so make sure we get that. Now I'm going to get the Y value of this and set the center to that. Weld up. There we are. Okay. It's looking really nice. Getting a good shape going on. Doesn't look like a whole lot right now, but when you have, 3 of these things and they're textured and you got all kinds of nice details in them, all this prep work that we're doing now, making sure that everything is correct and that it's all modeled as close as we can to get to all quads that will really help us in the end. Some of the details we can model, and then some of the details we'll do with texturing software. So try to do the best of both worlds based upon our needs and based upon what is most sensible, you know. Okay, there we are. Perfect. Let's go to our vertices. And again, we're going to make sure we flatten them on the X. And then when we snap to the center, they weld up nicely. And these guys work out because when I move in the gun here, these guys are already flat, so we know that those work. So we'll just snap those closed. And we'll do a weld when we're all finished to make sure that everything is seamed up nicely. And on the bottom as well. Can't forget about any shape. There's a lot of technical work on the insides here. Turbo Smooth, yes, that's why I'm trying to keep everything as close to quads as possible. So I can use Turbo Smooth. My initial normal map outside of Max is going to be just basic rounded corners. It's not going to be anything fancy. I'm going to use Quixel Suite to do some normal map details that I can actually paint the details that I want to see. And so that will be a lot easier. Do it that way. Okay, we got right here, we're going to fill in. But yes, excellent question. Yes, Turbo Smooth. And so that's why we're making sure we have as close to possible of, now this is one that's going to be a little tricky. All quads is what we're shooting for. Yeah, it's going to do that. Now this part on the bottom here, I'm going to go first in triangles, even though I was just saying all quads, because it's a flat surface, so it won't be as big of an issue. For that. Trying to see this. Better see that as a problem. Zero map. There we go. Okay. Woo! Let's do the back. Nope. Okay. There we go. Yeah, I'm absolutely, awesome, in love with this process. I'm just making sure I do as good a job as I can for you guys to make sure you guys are seeing, the best that I can do. I want to make sure that I do it right. I don't give you guys false information, or if I mess up, I'm no expert. I'm still learning every day, just like you guys are. So if you have any suggestions, anything that you know that I can do better, or anything you want to see me work on more specifically, I can definitely do some streams about that. Just let me know. I'd be happy to help. All right, so I'm going to give this guy a little bit of a rounded edge in the back here, because I want to have a little bit of a curve to it. And it's not perfect because, well, you know what? Let's do this. Hey, you need me?
I don't know how to set up the DVD.
Okay, I'll be right there. Take a quick look at that. There we are. Okay. So let's go ahead and weld this up on the corners. Now what I just did there was I made a rounded part out of a part that would have been a triangular edge, and that should give us a nice look there. Now we can see here we can move this back a little bit. I'm gonna soften that edge just a little bit. And not too much though, because I do want this to be softer like this. but I do want to make sure that it eventually angles back up into the shape of the gun. Let's do something like that. Great, okay. That looks really good. We got all the bottoms all set up, top is all set up. Great, okay. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add to the top of the stack and edit poly, so that I can go this and say weld, and I want to make sure it's a very low weld threshold, and very low. There we are. And then we're going to go to our polygon selection mode. I want to do an auto smooth. Okay, do a quick render. Now we got a little bit of pinching here, so we got to figure out why that's occurring. Let's check it out. Might be a render issue in Max. We'll check it out in Unity to make sure that it's correct. We got our first piece here, so let's check it out quickly with how it looks with our rotation. So if I turn on this, if I turn on the rings and turn on the cylinder, we can look at it, make sure it's intersecting at the right point, and it looks like it is. Might move that up just a little bit. So I'm going to take a quick break here, guys, and when we come back, we're going to talk about how to rotate this by 2 more sections, and then we're going to move on to the more main part of the weapon, okay? So we're going to take a quick break, and I will be right back. Alright guys, so we are back. Keep drinking there, so I keep talking to you all. Alright, so we have our first spoke here, and we want to make sure we make a couple copies of it, and what we need to do is rotate about this center of the cylinder here. So what I'm going to do is select this object, and it's not final, you know, we're going to come back to it. We want to get the whole thing kind of blocked out first. So I'm going to go here and say Effect Pivot Only, and with that selected, I can go here and align the pivot to this object and say OK. So now the pivot is aligned to the center of the cylinder, and as we discussed earlier, to rotate 360 degrees, we need 3 copies. 360 degrees divided by 3 is 120. So 120 degrees. So going by the front, if I hold Shift and rotate, and I go to 120, you'll notice I'm right there. If I release, I want not 1 but 2 copies. There we go. So now if we look at it, it's looking a lot more menacing. with our 3 spokes. Now what we can do for animation purposes is we can actually take each of these and do a select and link it to the center cylinder. So now if I do this and this and this, now if I were to take the center cylinder and rotate it, you'll see all 3 move with it. So that'd be really cool for animation. One thing I am going to do actually is before I do that, I'm going to take this center guy, which he is linked, which is cool. He's already linked. But now taking him, I'm going to do it one more time just to show you a slight change in thought. Instead of a copy, I'm going to turn this into, I believe it's an instance is what I want, and I want 2 of these. So there we go. So now, coming back here, if I select the cylinder and I rotate, all 3 are still connected, but any changes I make to this guy should now affect all the other copies. So if I suddenly took this and made it really, really wide, you'll notice on the other 2 it's doing the exact same thing. So now that means if we're going to make changes to this and if we're going to improve it in the future, or if we wanted to suddenly make this stick out more, we only have to affect 1 of the 3 spokes, and we don't have to go back and change all 3 spokes individually. That's just, a waste of our time. I believe I can still name these though, so I'm going to call this spoke B and spoke C. And we'll rename this guy to spoke A. There we go. All right. So all of those are under our rotation. So if we hide the rotation, we hide the entire front of the gun, which is pretty cool. All right, so the front of the gun is done. Let's start working our way backwards, and let's make the body of the gun. So I'm going to hide our rotation. I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to call this trigger. So we're going to work on the trigger system, the little handheld part there. So with trigger selected, let's go into our views. Again, we're going to do the side view first and then mirror it across. And this will be much easier with a lot fewer of pieces to it. Let's take a look at our concept art really fast. And what we see here is it does have a center seam, so it is symmetrical. We can use that to our advantage, which is awesome. It does have a few pieces here that have some extra little details to it. I think for simplicity's sake, we're going to kind of ignore that for the moment because it'll be easier to model. We can do some normal map details to kind of fake that. And on screen, the whole character is going to be maybe this big for you guys on a total screen. And so his gun is going to be like this big. So you might not even see it. But we will try and do some of these other details at the top. And the holes we're going to leave for normal map details. We're not going to worry about cutting those out. So we're just going to do this part down here at the bottom, the actual handle itself, all the way up including this, and this center part, which is the actual trigger. I think I'm going to collapse this in the middle and close that off because the trigger needs to actually go into something. And right now the whole trigger right here based upon this looks like it's coming out. Sorry, you can't even see because my face is in the way. The whole trigger, I'm going to collapse it right at about this point because the whole thing needs to go into something. And right now it looks like it goes all the way to the edge, which means this trigger doesn't function. So that's one of the things that we have to look at the concept art and understand what is the function of the object, and I need to make some changes, so be it, to make sure that it's functional for the user. Alright, so let's bring that back over there. And I'm going to make sure I can see it. There we go. Okay. So for our trigger here, what I'm going to do is create a plane. There we are. And I'm going to move this plane, and I'm going to make this in 3 pieces. The first piece is going to be this bottom part that just connects up. So let's bring him down there. And it's okay, I'm going to turn this guy into edible poly, that's okay. Right away. And let's just move some bits around. So you're going to go into there. And again, all I'm doing is looking for the general outline to begin with. So bring him all the way up to there. There we are. Now, I'm going to do, what I was suggesting is bring my opacity way down. Something like that. Excellent. Alright, so now we have our, now we have our general outline. We can start to cut some additional shapes into here. So let's get some extra points to work with. And just to kind of curve that out. And you don't really need much curving, but I'll give you a little bit of curving, why not? Let's go down to center, because I do need some extra girth. There you are. And you can just kind of rest in the center. Okay. So that's all he is. He's a simple piece. From the front, can't really see because everything's in the way, but this is in the very center. I know it's not this far. According to my concept art, it's in just a little bit, so let's move it in about there. There we go. And all we need really are these two edges and these two edges. Scale that out, take all those points, go to 0, there we go. So that's our first piece. And I'm going to mirror that. Let's do symmetry. On the Z, do not slice, but do weld. So there, he's all set. I thought we had a question, sorry. I see the change over to the side, and I'm looking to see if anybody has any questions. Apparently my cat has a question. Alright, so that piece is all set. Now we're going to build the next piece, which is the much more complex piece. So what I'm going to do is, on the side view here, I'm going to make a copy of the whole object. But I'm going to make sure this is a copy and not a reference. And let's hide the original piece. So hide that guy. Yeah, hide that guy and go to this guy, turn off symmetry for the moment. And I'm going to use these, I'm just going to reuse these points because why not? It's very easy to use these points. So bottom. And start to round it out. Yeah, she's pretty crazy. Always when I'm trying to be, professional and make sure there's no noise for you guys, and then she's like, I'm gonna ruin the stream. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, trying to stick to the center of the object as best I can, make sure everything is equidistant. There we are. Okay, so this goes all the way to an edge where it's then cutting across. So I'm trying to stick to. There we are. Center. So this is going to be our center point all the way up, which is very nice. And this guy doesn't really want to be, because it's going to come all the way down. So that's no problem. We can cut, make an extra cut. No worries there. Okay. Excellent. So let's take a look. Looking quite nice. Now we're going to have to redo our edges on the sides. So I'm going to delete those for now because we don't need those at the moment. Alright, so let's just keep stretching it out. I'll bring you all the way over. Up. So again, trying to keep a focus point on what would be a center. So here, I could, this is a neat trick. You can select two and do a connect, because all I really care about is this center point, because I want to weld it up, but you end up with this extra piece. So what I do is then take this guy and start moving him forward and say, here, now this. Very nice. I'm starting to curve this out, so I'm going to do that there. I'll weld these two guys up. Come on, there you go. Weld those two guys up. Just kind of push the cane along the road, And the same thing there. These two. Now what you can do is take these two, and actually what might be better is target weld there, target weld there. Now you have two faces you can actually work with. There we are, so keep going. A little bit further. And bring this all the way to the edge. But this guy I'm going to leave in the center, and we'll cut across and make some changes there. You do need to be right in the center, and you need to kind of curve out just a little bit more. There we go, so we can get that curved shape going on. Try and keep the curve. So it'll help also when it's unwrapped, because it reminds us that this thing has a curvature to it, so that we're not treating it like it's a flat object. we are, okay. And I'm only going to worry about the one side for the moment. So don't worry about it if it looks weird. Going off of the concept for that, so I'm going to delete those. Don't really care about those at the moment. I'm going to come back, or we're going to come back to it because we want to make sure that we get everything worked out. Okay, so you come all over here. See, the image gets a little blurry when I get too close to it. So what I'm relying on now is the concept art on the side view. So let's bring that in. This definitely needs a lot more curvature in here. So let's take this guy. I'm going to chamfer him. Total amount of the chamfer is going to be something like this, but I do need an extra piece in the middle there. So there we go. Let's move that out just a little bit. There we go. And this comes straight, flattens out, flattens out. There we are. Very nice. And connect. There we go. Okay. See, now these can be useful to get us squared away with the design. So you come to there, and then you're going to come down. But we need to make sure that we are taking into account that we still need our center line to go up and probably connect up the top of here. So we can use these for now, but we're going to be making some changes, so it's okay. Okay, I'm trying to keep an even count, so you'll notice my center point of the curve is about here. So I'm trying to keep an even count of that, so I have 3 above. I only have 2 below at the moment, so I probably need an additional point down here. So I'm going to chamfer, I can't chamfer you, because you're only 1 point, so I need to cut one more piece out of that. Excellent. All right. So work out that curve a little bit. There we go. So that's the overall shape now. We need to clean up the actual geometry in the center. So trying to stay on a central path, working my way up towards this point. There we go. These curves need to come into the fold somehow, and they can be absolved once we get a certain distance in. But what we need to do is make sure that these points are handled in the most appropriate manner that we can. So, for example, we want to keep as square as we can, but here these two need to disappear somewhere because we don't have room for them down here. We don't have a need for them. So if I bring this cut up, you'll notice I could solve that there, but then where is this guy going to get solved, you know? He only needs to really come in a little bit, and then he can sort of disappear. We can kind of put him under the rug. So gets you to there. A little bit of a triangle, but we try to avoid them as much as we can. And let's take those two, and we can attach those. Not attach, so I can connect. So I can get rid of this triangle here. Doesn't really matter too much because you're going to have triangles once you get it into game. Every game engine in the world will turn it into triangles. It will happen. So we'll work it out. All right, we do have a little bit of a detail there, but that we can probably fake with our normal map, so no issues there. The one thing we have is this part right here. We come down, and this face right here, we're going to need to remain static, and we're going to bring everything else out, or we can bring this in. Makes a little bit more sense if he's the one thing that stays. But so let's invert our selection and extrude just a little bit. Oh, just a little bit, not that much. Something like that works. And you and flatten you out. So I'm going to take these two edges and kind of connect them. I just undid that, which was stupid of me. Let's loop all of that. Sorry. Loop all of that. Come on. And we're going to make another extrusion out, and all of these points need to go to 0. So if all these points go to 0, and if I bring this back all the way up, you'll see my mad genius in a second. Let's go here. I want to make this a lot smoother. Smooth that out. There we are. So now, according to the realistic shaded. So according to the concept art, there's this cut that goes through it. You'll notice here. This cut that goes through it right here. But what we need to do is stop that about halfway, because this whole trigger piece needs to actually go into something. Okay? So that's what we've done. If we look at it from the side, so we've left room for that to occur. And let's make sure of it. Let's delete those. And just a little bit of that. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm making a bit of a space for this to come into, because right now there wasn't one, and so I'm going off the beaten path a little bit in order to make sure that our concept art works well as far as physically, so that the gun can function. And where is my... Move this based upon edges, make sure it lines up. Now we could, weld that in the corners, weld up all this, and we will eventually once we get down to the low poly, but I want to make sure for now that we can use some high poly stuff. And this can solve down to here. And target weld. Clean that up. Excellent. And same thing up here, we need to make some adjustments. It should still be on edge. It is. Perfect. And we need to solve. We can solve to the top center. No problem. There. So now when we do this, we get a lot better result. Bridge. Select everything. I'll do a little bit of a weld, not that much of a weld. There we go. So that looks a lot better, and we've added some realism to it so that it will have a shape to go into. So let's go ahead and make the trigger, the actual trigger that you squeeze next. So that's all set. That looks really nice. Save. Now let's get this actual name. These pieces need a name. And we notice that we need some adjustments to this piece. Let's adjust this piece a little bit. So this guy needs to just kind of bury himself in there. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So we got the trigger for our gun going on here, and we have the bottom piece to that, the kind of joint where it connects in there. So let's just smooth this guy out really quick. Clear all, auto smooth. There we are. Looking good. All right. So we'll give this guy the first thing and this guy the second one. That way you can kind of see them apart. And we'll give the actual trigger part the same kind of piece. So let's call this, let's name this. We're going to call this trigger handle. Call this trigger handle. It's like the pivot piece. It's like a extender. Let's call it pivot. So I know what they mean to me. And again, black wireframes, please. So that if I go to I think it's F4, yeah, F4 now I can see the wireframe as I'm working. Excuse me. Alright, so now we can make the actual trigger using some of these pieces as a reference like we've done before. So I'm going to select all of these, and I think that'll be good enough to start with. Let's go to the left, and we're going to make a copy. I'm going to detach as a clone, and call this trigger. And this is the actual part you squeeze. I guess that is the trigger, but let's call it trigger. Trigger. So we know exactly what we're talking about. And you'll see if I move, we just have those pieces, which is great. So let's go to extrude mode, and we're going to extrude straight out by local normal. And of course we're going to have to adjust them a little bit, but that's okay. Whoops. Pitch mode's still on. Okay. Out to there. And again, we're just going to follow. It looks like it's a pretty sharp curve. I'm just going to follow that. Okay, all the way up. Keep going. Alright, now when we get to the top here, what I'm going to do is move this all the way up. Move you all the way up. Just bury you up in there. And take all of these and bury them in there. And what I need to do is actually hide that for now. And turn this semi-transparent. I think that trick works well. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to use this trick so that I can actually reuse more of our spacing, so we don't have to have so many extra loops for no good reason. This is a small detail, really, when you think about the total shape of the full object. This is just a little bit, so we don't want to be wasting our time with huge amounts of detail on something so tiny. So we'll try and balance this out. And these just need to be far enough in order to hide themselves. We don't want it to go too far because then it's extra geometry on the UV sheet. Okay. Curve. Alright. Looking pretty nice. Let's turn our opacity all the way back up. And let's unhide our handle again. Okay. Looks very nice. Let's go to the side here. We don't need a side because it's going to mirror over. And we do want to make sure that all of these are at the same value. Now when we move these back into place, we want to make sure that it's going to sink into this and go all the way back, because that was our original intention. So we're going to do that, and that value is this. So let's do that with the same value to these. There we are. And you'll see what I'm talking about in just a moment. All the way back. So now that's the furthest back that it needs to go. So now when the whole thing moves later on, let's center the pivot so you can see this a bit better. I can demonstrate this. So when the whole trigger gets squeezed, it can animate like this. So we just need to make sure it's far enough that when it's the furthest forward is unsqueezed, so that when it does get squeezed and moved back, so you could go all the way to here before it pokes out the back. So that works nicely. Alright, let's go ahead and throw our symmetry on there. SY, enter. On the Z, very little. Do not slice, please. And again, why does that not look? That's not symmetry. There it is. I'm gonna make one more final adjustment, even though it's accurate to the actual image. Move this up just slightly. Back it in. because it just seems physically wrong that it's right on the very edge. So there we are. Trigger mechanism. And see, I can see behind my image here to look at it from all angles to make sure I can get it from all angles. There we are. That's looking really nice. So now I could go to my camera, by the way. I can unhide all the rotation stuff. We have the trigger. And now if we do a render, we see here's all that we have of the gun thus far. Alright, so how's everybody enjoying tonight? Are we having a good time? You guys learning new things, I hope. Do you have any questions? Anything so far? Anything that I went over maybe a little too fast? If you have any questions or anything, let me know. Definitely let me know in the chat. Share with your friends if you think they would enjoy. And again, I'm open to, if you guys want to see something in particular, let me know. Tonight we're going to be modeling this object. We're about halfway, doing pretty well. And yeah, let me know. Other than that, I'm going to continue for you guys. So feel free to jump in, let me know. Alright. So our next piece, what we need to do is pick something else to create. What looks interesting. Okay, we'll do the handle, the bar across, and then there's these, and we'll do that. Alright. So I can see those bars curving down in here, and I can see the bar across, and from the top, and we get a really nice view of all that. So I'm going to hide the trigger and hide the rotation just so that I have a clear viewing window, if you will. And let's make a new layer. Now for this layer, I'm going to call this handlebar. So this is the handlebar area, so it's going to include all three of those pieces. So with this selected, I'm going to create a new box. And I'm going to create this in the top view, I believe. Yeah. So I'm just going to drag out a box. Doesn't matter at all the size at the moment. I'm going to turn it into an editable poly right away. Alright, so let's start with moving these points so that we line up with above the view, please. Thank you. We want to line up with this right here where it connects to this thick bar here. And I just want those to be about there. Push it in just a little bit. And right about there. Looks good. And I'll move this to here, and then it's going to start to curve out, curve out, curve out. Now from the side view, let's line it up vertically. It's a little blurry, but it looks like it comes down to there. If you can get concept art from your concept artist that's in like an insane resolution, that works a lot better because then you can make sure everything's lined up really, really well. And this still looks a little thick according to my image. I'm always looking off screen to see my concept art to make sure I'm following that really closely. Okay, all that looks good. I can see on the side here that it's about the right level. Okay, and now we can start to extrude it out. So we go to face. First I'm going to select this face that's going to be internal and delete it. Then I'm going to select this face and I'm going to extrude. Not that much at all. It tends to do that. So what I'm going to do is jump all the way over here to where it straightens out again. And I go look over here and see where that is in here. That's right about there. There we are. And I'm going to extrude again. And I'm going to bring it all the way to here. And now right at this point we've got an interesting shape. So let's take a look at it before we jump into that. So from the side here we can see it curves around. We got a nice little indent there. And from my concept art from here it's a little clearer. So it's going to curve around that and then straighten out again. So we're going to use a cylinder, try and line that up to get like a curve, and then straighten it out. And it's completely flat as far as this, as far as the top and bottom are completely flat. Excuse me. It doesn't have any vertical axes to it, so that's pretty good. So I'm going to leave this on my kind of isometric view of the whole area. There we go. Okay, so that comes to a point there. So what I'm going to do is create a cylinder from above, that. Move him up. And we need to make sure that this guy is approximately the same size and shape. So let's do that. Oops. I let go of it and it just snapped. That's actually really good. Okay. I'll bring them up to about here and I'm going to scale them. Because I just want a little bit of a curve around the corner of that. There we go. That looks really nice. Let's bring you down. And what I can do is I can actually line up these vertices, which will be really cool. I'll show you. So editable poly, and what I'm going to do is delete. Select all those. So I'm going to delete from those edges so that these can line up perfectly. So let's go and delete that. Looking good, looking good. Okay, thank you, malware. Alright, so we can do that, but then we need to come over here, and this will just be, the rest of it will be poly modeling across the rest of that. So let's go to our original box, and we need to delete this front face, because now we're going to weld everything up. And I'm actually going to go to the cylinder shape, and it looks like I'm going to delete a lot of it, but you'll see why. Because what I needed was that curve. That's what I needed most. So I'm going to go to my original box and attach a new piece. Now they are all attached as one object. So as I do things like this where I bridge across, now I have one object completely. And you'll notice with the z-axis I wanted this here, so I'll take these guys. Just copy and pasting that value to make sure everything is completely flat. There we go, copy and paste. Works wonders. Alright, and using this face I'm going to first extrude out because I know that I need that, and now I need to work to kind of blend that together. So I'm going to cut this, say I need it to come to about there, and yeah, that'll work.